Item 63 is the first consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 70 of the Municipal Code regarding large capacity magazines and trigger activators. This item was to not be considered before the conclusion of all other items or before 6 p.m., whichever one is later. Under that, we had a version A and a version B and a version C. The version C is a resolution delaying the action on firearm accessory regulations while such regulations are further studied, and extra item sponsored by myself and council members Coleman, Gatto, Gray, and Westergaard. This whole discussion, and I'll turn it over to the council, came out of an ongoing discussion that we've had at City Council for a number of years regarding the safety of our citizens in and around public places and spaces, and what is it that we can do here. I will say that as we note that there have been a lot of incidents. A lot of it started around Sandy Hook. Everybody wondered, what is it that we can do? And there were a lot of parents who stood up and said, never again, we're going to step out. There were parents, there were kids, there were everybody else after that tragedy. And just so that everybody doesn't forget that as of July 15th of 2019, and when we said never again, there have only been 2,162 mass shootings in this country since then. So we're all looking for solutions. A lot of them have less to do with the weapons than the mindset and mental health, and what is it that we can do around a lot of those areas. How do we work with people, work with neighborhoods, work with groups, work with young people, old people, make them feel good about who they are, where they are, and what kind of anti-violence training can we do. The Moines Police Department has initiated lots of things in and around our city, and including summer basketball programs on Thursday nights, sort of a kick-off the summer event where they get out and do neighborhood-based service delivery, where we have our staff, including Des Moines Police, get out and about. When there are other issues that created either a violent situation, wherever, we have our community ambassadors that go out that are citizens that from all walks of life, and at this moment we have over 300 members to that group that get out and about the neighborhood, and some of our council members are part of that effort. So we want to make sure that we continue our efforts and make sure that we can find ways as citizens right here in the city of Des Moines to keep our citizens safe, and it's all of us working together that are going to make that a reality. Moving forward and trying to work together as residents, as businesses, as elected officials, at all levels, not just at the city council level, the county level, the legislature, and hopefully Washington, that we all can find solutions that puts people at ease about where they live, who they are, what they are, and what their expectations can be of public safety in the places where they live, in the places that they visit, whether it be a theater, or whether it be a church, or whether it be the street, or a place that they work. We want to try to protect the health, well-being, and interests of all of our citizens, regardless of their race, their color, their age, their gender. That's who we are. We're a compassionate city. We care about each other, and we want to work together to make this a better place. So with that, I'll open it up with our council members who may have some things, and I'm sure there are some other individuals. Mr. Coleman, did you have
I do. Maybe just a couple of quick comments. I spoke with many of my colleagues about item C in front of us, and just to give you a little background, I think it was last Wednesday, I was with Councilmember Bozen, and she was the first to say, this looks really confusing, and we shouldn't be voting on it Monday. And I talked to people Wednesday night. She and I were together again Thursday morning, talked a little bit about a process to do a little bit more research, especially on the issue of our legal authority. How does it intersect with state law and constitutional issues? While this is something I think many of us would like to find a way to address, we need to do it in light of existing law and court rulings, and especially the state legislature that's active. And a couple of weeks ago, we asked for this to come back right away, and I think one of the things that we've learned is this is significantly more complicated given the various rulings that already exist. And so it's basically my own conclusion. These are my words that, I really want to make a difference on this issue of violence and mass shootings. I want to make our community here in Des Moines safer. And I think that we need to study this more before we know that this is the right strategy and that we have the legal authority to do it. I think my desire to make a difference is important. I think voting on this tonight would be simply to make a point, and probably a political point, because it's not going to stand. We've had the benefit of some legal advice and input, and I think that we need to continue to work on it. So, and so that the speakers know before, at least for me, I intend to support item C, to seek that kind of guidance from the courts and the legislature before I were to act on something along these lines. I've been, certainly been contacted by members of the legislature who have voiced that they think it's already prohibited under their law and the laws that they've set. And if there's gray space, they certainly will act to limit our authority. Those are nobody speaks for the whole legislature, but those are things that I'm hearing. And so I think it's best that we continue to study, research the legal authority we have, and for how we use that, and to delay action today. So that is my motion, item C. I would like to incorporate in the motion the comments that the mayor has made. It was back when he joined the council before he was mayor, that our community policing, he and I had other members of the council started NBSD, that have just now been assumed have been around forever, but a lot of good things have happened over the last 20 or 25 years, as he points out, including the ambassador program. There's other programs that are models around the country for violence suppression and intervention, and I'd like, as part of my motion, to move item C and refer to the manager and his team, which of course includes the human rights director and the police department and so forth, but to include in my motion a referral to the manager to study these and to come back with other best practices that are short of gun restrictions at this time, but that might put us in a position as we study this and watch what the legislature does, that we have a chance to maybe implement some voluntary programs that don't have the legal or constitutional issues that tonight's proposal does. So, Mayor, that's what I'd like. I think there's a majority of council members that have supported and sponsored item C, that the public can be confident that that we're not going to act, and so maybe their comments can be shared in light of that tonight.
Okay. Any other council members want to?
Do you want us to comment now before?
Your choice.
Okay. I can comment now. This is coming from someone that doesn't own a gun, doesn't have a permit for a gun, only fired a gun once or twice in my life. But in the United States Constitution, it says we have the right to bear arms, period. It doesn't say you have the right to bear arms, but not in Des Moines, Iowa. And, you know, that being said, we have not a large capacity magazine or trigger activator problem in our country. We have much bigger problems than those things, and that's not going to cure anything. This is a version A, and version B is for, I'm not sure what it's for, other than to raise people's profile that want to run for a different position or do something different here in our city. I'm not that guy, and I'm not going to be that guy. I help sponsor item C because I think that's the right thing to do. This is something that the city of Des Moines should not even be tackling. Us as a council should not even be discussing this. You guys shouldn't be here because this shouldn't even be an issue in Des Moines or anywhere else on the city council level. This is a problem up at the Capitol and in our federal government. And until they change, we can't, no matter what we would pass tonight, it would be changed in 6 months. We know that. And it's silly to think that we're not focusing our time on things that matter. Keeping our taxes low, fixing our streets, fixing our sewers, making sure that we have plenty of police officers and fire department on the street and our response times are the right way. That's what the job of a Des Moines City Councilman is. And I know there'll be people up here that disagree with me, but that's why I ran for this seat, and I have no intention ever to run for a seat up there or any higher in government. And that's just coming from a guy that I'm not carrying a gun, and I don't have any intention of carrying a gun. Because if somebody wants to kill me, well, then you know what? Then that's what's going to happen. Because I am not the person that's going to shoot somebody. That's just me. I'll stop rambling about it. I'm going to support item C, so maybe some of your comments will be a lot less than what it was going to be before. But that's how I feel about this whole issue. This is a non-issue and shouldn't be discussed at the Des Moines City Council level.
If I could just come in, I agree with what Chris and Joe have both said. I think the issue is mental health services in our country and in our state, and I encourage everyone to go east, right there up to the Golden Dome, and we need to talk to our legislators about increasing funding for mental health. That's the issue, is the mental health problem that we're not addressing in this state and in this country.
I think this really came about too because we had people come forward and as I told some of the out-of-state people who were calling me today, we were reacting to what we heard from our citizens that wanted a safer city. And some of these things were measures that would do that really doesn't take a gun away. It does take some articles or things that have been involved in a lot of the mass shootings. So as regard to that we would look into it and come up with something if it could be feasible. We realized that because of the legislature and all the other implications that it would probably be preempted or whatever after talking to more people, and that's what we said we would try to do. There are so many more, there are things, it's mental health, it's poverty, there's all kinds of things that create violence or whatever, and whatever we can do to help mitigate, building, hopefully people, we definitely raise people's attention. Hopefully all those people that are concerned will go out and help in their community in a bigger way. My issue on the resolution too was the time frame, because sometimes when we say we will review, what is that time frame to come back to review? Is it after the legislative session? Are we going to talk to them some more? So those are the reasons I didn't really sign off on that. Not that I'm not supportive of that. I just felt sometimes it goes into this, well, what is that time frame going to be? So if we are going to, if we feel concerned that we want to go forward in talking with our legislators, we realize it's a legislative issue in the most part, but I would be supportive of the resolution, seeing that I still think we need a lot more work to do to help make sure our community is as safe as it can be.
Thank you, Mayor. My initial response when I first saw this was to vote no. Thank God we got council members Coleman and Gala that straightened me out a little bit. I think I'm going to vote. I know I'm going to vote for 63C, but let me give you a little background here. I'm an outdoorsman. I love hunting and fishing more than anything else out there. There's one thing I like better than all that. I've got a wife, I've got 4 kids, and I've got 7 grandkids. And a lot of times they'll stay with me. I dread and pray to God that that day never comes when that door gets knocked down and my wife and my family are going to be in danger. And I have to limit myself to 10 rounds. I'm going to take whatever it takes. My family, I wake up every day and think of them. How can I make their lives better? That's the last thing I do. I say a prayer for them when I go to bed. I want their safety first and foremost in everything that we do. And unfortunately, this is the way the laws of physics work. If you're shooting near 45 for defense or self-defense, it goes faster than 911. That's the thing that really triggers me. I want to make sure my family is safe under any circumstances. They're the life and light of my life. I will do anything if I have to go down. I just keep using this phrase. 2 things will happen if somebody tries to break in my house. Somebody's going to be taken out in a stretcher, and somebody's going to be taken out in handcuffs. And I prefer to be the one taken out in handcuffs. So I think we need to take a good, solid look and work with the legislature, because it is beyond our needs and our capabilities to try and do something here. So I support 63B as well. C. Sorry. C.
Josh, you want to speak now or what?
I'm gonna wait and comment.
Okay.
Good evening.
What do we think? How many are going to speak here? Do we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, probably about 10. What do we say? 3 minutes each? Everybody? 3. Okay. All right. Thank you. Name and address.
I'll talk extra fast. I appreciate the council's apparent intention to punt on this, however you kick the hornet's nest, so things have to be said. My name is Richard Rogers. I reside at 2417 Fuller Road in West Des Moines, Iowa. I speak tonight as a board member and spokesman for the Iowa Firearms Coalition, which is an all-volunteer organization dedicated to ensuring that Iowa governments recognize, respect, and protect our natural and fundamental right to keep and bear arms. We oppose the proposed ordinance as foolish, illegal, and because we believe such laws will ultimately be ruled unconstitutional. First, though, Councilman Mandelbaum owes the gun owners of America an apology for his outrageous statement at the June 3rd council meeting. Quote, "We can act, and we should, because the only reason someone has something like a high-capacity clip or a trigger activator is to do as much damage as possible, or do as much damage to as many people as quickly as possible." Does he really mean to say that untold millions of Americans are mass killers of women? That idea is as absurd as it is disgusting. Mass shootings are actually quite rare, yet the ammunition magazines he proposes to ban are exceptionally common, probably numbering into the hundreds of millions. Since they already possess the devil's tools, what are these evil masses, your neighbors, waiting for? Councilman Mandelbaum also stated there's no reason for people to have high-capacity magazines. Tell that to the 61-year-old Florida man who was attacked in his rural home in the wee hours last Wednesday by 4 young men armed with at least 2 pistols and a shotgun. The homeowner defended his life with an AR-15 that he had at his bedside. When police arrived, they found the homeowner sitting on his bed with his rifle across his legs. He had been shot in the stomach but fought back and lived. One intruder died on the floor of the room after emptying his pistol. An accomplice also died at the scene, and the other 2 were captured nearby. I doubt if this homeowner or any other person who's had to resort to a defensive firearm ever thought, "I wish I hadn't had so many cartridges in my gun." Only murderers shoot to kill, Councilman. Law enforcement and civilians are trained to stop the threat. Unlike in Hollywood, guns are not one-shot solutions to aggression. Even with a fatal shot to the heart, a motivated attacker can fight on for about 15 seconds before succumbing. You council members cannot know what defensive tools a citizen may require, and neither will he until a moment of need arises. The council's stated concern is mass public shootings. The state and other places that will deny these problems. President Obama has made this claim, it's not so. In a study of mass shootings 2009-2015 in 18 countries, Europe plus US and Canada, the US ranked 12 in the frequency of mass public shootings after such countries as Switzerland, Norway, Belgium, Austria, the Czech Republic, and France, while barely exceeding the rate in Canada and the Netherlands. Neither your ordinance nor no gun signs have any magical power to ward off evil. In fact, they enable it. A According to studies by the Crime Prevention Research Center, mass public shootings from 1998 to June 2019 have occurred in so-called gun-free zones 89% of the time. You have a lot of whereases in your proposed ordinance. If you really want to do something to protect citizens, I suggest you add another. Whereas nearly all public mass murders are committed in so-called gun-free zones, this council hereby resolves to eliminate as many of them as possible. I had 2 more minutes, but thank you.
My name is Heather Dunn. I'm at 1414 Carpenter Avenue in Des Moines. I'm a transgender woman, and I am also a fervent Second Amendment supporter. I want to speak to you as someone who's part of a community that faces a high hate crime rate. We are targeted by evil people, not by uneducated people, but by, I would say, evil people. Having as many regulations as you want isn't going to stop evil people from wanting to do me and other LGBTQ people harm. I'm not here to represent any organization. I'm not here on the left, right, middle. I'm just here as a human being. I'm here as an American. When I first came out, one of the steps of my transition was to get my concealed carry permit. Particularly here in the state of Iowa, when gender identity is not even protected under the hate crimes law, and unfortunately, a lot of times when a lot of these murders aren't even being reported on. I cannot trust my government when they think it is controversial to protect people like me from hate crimes. Unfortunately, I can't wait for the government to act. Fortunately, the founders created such a mechanism, and the Supreme Court recognized that in the Heller decision. Do not take away my rights. Just like people who oppose transgender people do so out of ignorance. And I sincerely believe that a lot of the people that are anti-Second Amendment do so out of ignorance. They've never met a gun owner. They don't know anything about guns. It's the same way. So my whole thing is like, I agree with the C. I wish our state government did the same thing with the Medicaid ban for transgender-related health care. But we don't need to copy their behavior and rush through an ordinance like this without hearing the facts, without hearing different sides. So I urge you to vote for version C. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
Hey, Marco Battalion, 521 Moines Avenue, Des Moines, Iowa, 50315. I have been out collecting signatures, so I first wanted to commend Councilmember Coleman for his years of service. And just do that publicly as well as electronically. But no one that I've talked to has said that they would like to see irresponsible use of firearms. So I think there is area for common ground on issues like this. I also want to commend what I've heard from the council thus far, references to Iowa code, to the state and federal constitutions and the Bill of Rights. That's always good to hear from the city council. And I think a number of really important items were brought up before we even got to discussing this here. I know people like to give figures to have us believe, we're more violent, we have more shootings, we're in more danger. But I think a broad study of what's going on in our cities and the country would show we're actually moving in the opposite direction. So I think it's important to not let emotions always run wild when something horrible happens. And I do think that there are things that we can do. A number of people have mentioned mental health. We have a great blueprint here in Des Moines. If you haven't been there, I encourage you to tour Passageway Mental Health Clubhouse. There's so much data to support the clubhouse model of mental health care. They gladly give anyone here a tour, and I think we need more access to places like this all over the city. So that is just in reference to what else was mentioned there. Also heard one of my favorite presidents referenced earlier, JFK, so that's always good to see. But I think some of the figures we do need to look at is defensive use of firearms versus incidents where it can be proven that these accessories or bump stocks were used to harm someone not involved in self-defense. I think if we look at the numbers, you see far more uses where someone defended themselves with a firearm than someone hurt an innocent person with a firearm. So just getting more facts out there, I think, would be helpful. I live on an acreage on the south side, so I have personally been on a walk with my partner, and we have encountered a dog that would make Stephen King crap his pants. And so there are other reasons why people would want firepower to defend themselves, of course, from people out to do them harm or their loved ones harm, but there are plenty of other reasons why this could be a useful tool as well. Anyway, long story short, I really like to see that item C giving this more thought. I think it would be an expensive and drawn out situation if A or B were to proceed and just cost people money. There'd be a lot of emotional arguments, but nothing would get done. Thank you.
We asked the rest of the people that are going to speak if you could kind of get over here on the south side so we could keep moving here. That'd be great.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Lasky. I live in Ankeny, 3020 Southwest 24th Court. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak in regard to these ordinances proposed June 3rd, 2019. As a representative for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, I want to recognize the efforts of community leaders in their review of these ordinances. We recognize the mayor and the ordinance sponsors, Josh Mandelbaum and Chris Pullman. Thank you for your leadership. I would also like to personally thank administrative staff, especially Monica Makrowski and Diane Rao, for guiding me through this process. I would like to take the opportunity to clarify that Moms Demand Action is a nonpartisan grassroots organization of mothers and others, as we like to say, who are committed to reducing gun violence in our communities through both legislative and cultural change. We understand that every time we engage in discussion on gun violence prevention, progress is made. I value every viewpoint I've heard here this afternoon. Community members were mobilized by the introduction of these ordinances, and they came together for productive discussions and offers to help. We look forward to continued work on making Des Moines safer for all. Thank you.
And Mary, I want to thank you for your work in demand action. I think that we want to hear the voices of all those that continue to be concerned, as well as those that are defending, I guess, Second Amendment. But the reality of what's going on, I think your point that we need to continue the discussion and find solutions is really what it's all about. So, thank you.
Hello, my name is Lance Shea. I live at 242 Hart Avenue, Des Moines. My address is in the fourth ward.
I know.
I brought a copy of what I'm going to read to you today. One for everybody except for you, Mr. Sanders.
I'll move through to see the file of our
Anyway, I'm here to speak against the proposed ordinance to ban magazines with capacity greater than 10 rounds. People familiar with firearms will tell you that there's a difference between a firearm component and a firearm accessory, and a magazine is considered a component, as found out. In fact, the ATF, in its National Firearms Act handbook uses the term component when referring to what makes a firearm function. On the other hand, the examples the ATF provides for accessories and attachments include things like belts, slings, aftermarket rubber grips, and hanging kits. Pretending state law doesn't cover a specific part of a firearm because it's using different terminology is disingenuous. I really appreciate what I've heard from Mr. Gatto and Mr. Carter, Mr. Gray this evening. As council is aware, that said, as council is aware, 72428 prohibits regulation by a political subdivision. And the ignorance of the terminology isn't a way to circumvent state law. Legislators believe that firearms laws should be made at the state level in order to avoid a patchwork of local ordinances, like the one that was proposed here. Quick phone call to any Des Moines area gun shop, like JT Guns and Supply on Marlhay Road, will confirm that they carry several brands of handguns and rifles that don't even come with magazines. They carry as few as 10 rounds. This ordinance would attempt a de facto ban on these firearms while threatening to criminalize the countless number of city residents who purchased them in the past. This ordinance intends to punish law-abiding citizens for actions of deranged criminals. It's frustrating to hear the City Council's June 3rd comments indicating belief that law-abiding gun owners, like me, own these magazines simply because we want to, quote, do as much damage to as many people as quickly as possible. Furthermore, limiting citizens' rights to how they're able to defend themselves does nothing to promote safety. An ordinance prohibiting murder would have the same effect on public safety. An ordinance regarding trigger actuators appears to be an attempt to gain public support for the magazine ban by pairing it with something that people find scary and don't understand. Trigger actuators have already been prohibited on a federal level, and the trigger actuator ordinance has the same effect as an ordinance that would prohibit Des Moines residents from owning things like rocket launchers. In conclusion, I ask that you vote against these ordinances. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Matt Rainey. I live at 5722 Franklin Avenue in Des Moines. I want to start by thanking you folks for having this meeting at a time that is not the middle of the day like so many of these typically are. As someone that has an extended experience in government, I did campaigns in state government work for about 10 years. We always put things right in the middle of the day. No one could ever come to them. So I really appreciate you guys. As a small business owner, it's very important to me to be able to come to the meeting and have my say as well. I'm sure others feel the same way. So thank you very much for making this a great time. I also want to commend Councilman Coleman, Councilman Gatto, and Councilman Gray for their obvious, some common sense approach to this matter. It's a tough issue. I mean, it's a tough issue for everybody. It's an emotionally charged issue. Gun violence, it's been an issue in many of our larger cities, and Des Moines is not, immune to that issue. But unfortunately, these resolutions don't actually they don't actually fix the problem. They make folks like myself and others in this room who are law-abiding citizens de facto criminals. They so decide to continue to own firearms that were legal when they purchased them, number one, and number two, purchase them in a way that are commonly manufactured. Councilman Bozen mentioned that this is not an attempt to take away guns. Well, no, I apologize. Not your exact words, but along the lines of not outlawing the firearms themselves. But that's really like saying you can buy a cell phone without a battery. You have to have the magazine in order to operate the firearm. As the last speaker mentioned, if you call around to the gun shops in town, there are many of the most popular firearms that are purchased. They wouldn't really be able to purchase them because they're manufactured with a 10-round magazine or more. It's just the way they come. It's a component, a part of the gun itself. And so that's really just an end around to a different solution, which is unfortunate. But I am really excited to hear some of the common sense from the other members, and I think that it's clear by Resolution C and having a majority of the names of the others up here that the attempt at making a political point by certain members of this body is going to be, hopefully put aside for better common sense. My last point about it is you guys have done so much great work tonight. You're talking about all these great projects that you're spending our tax dollars on, and you're being wise, and you're improving our city. An action like this will most certainly result in a legal proceeding that will cost the city a significant amount of money to defend. So rather than waste our money on something that's eventually going to be overturned up the hill, if not before, at our state Supreme Court, why don't we take the dollars you'd spend on that legislation and continue to funnel it into these great city programs like the parks that you talked about? So thank you very much for your time. Again, I really appreciate having the ability to address my city council and having everyone here tonight. It's great to see. A lot of times you also see, you know, councils where not everybody shows up. So it's really nice to see everybody here tonight, and hope everyone has a great rest of the meeting. Thank you.
I do want to say one thing as you part and walk away. Thank you for noticing that. I will tell you that this council is very good. We're almost all here every time because we want to hear what citizens have to say. So
I appreciate that.
You're noting that. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for listening to us all tonight. My name is Scott Singbush. I'm at 3614 47th Street in Beaverdale. Several of you have touched on it already. I'm going to be brief and to the point. Shall not infringe. We have that Second Amendment for a reason. Our founding fathers, who put that into writing, knew why. The reason being is a step like this. It's a chip. You start chipping away at something, you start chipping away a little more, and then you chip away a whole lot. And then by the time all the chipping is done, you got nothing. Every time, virtually every law or ordinance that's ever passed strips somebody or many of a liberty or a freedom. Thank you.
Patrick Gobles, 2424 King Avenue, Des Moines. I'd like to say first off, when you say, when the mayor said that there was 2,000 some mass shootings in this country, is that you have to remember that mass shootings start at a count of 4 or more people. So I would ask if you could kind of watch the wording, because when you say mass shootings, people naturally think of terrible events that's happened when there was mass people that were killed. I also want to say I don't think that it's, I'm glad that you're going to take a look at not pushing this through with the magazine capacity. I've been a victim of a home invasion. I've also had my house broken into. To think that I would be limited to how I could protect myself scares me. Criminals aren't going to abide by your ruling. If you say, oh, well, you can't have this in the city, criminals don't care. You know, they're not going to abide by that. They're going to come at you with whatever they have. And if I can only shoot 10 rounds and they have capacity of 20, I'm dead. Because I can't fight back anymore. And I'm sure you know, and I'm sure police officers know, when you get into that situation where you may have to use your firearm, there's going to be an adrenaline dump, you're going to be shaking, you're going to be scared, your tunnel vision, and you're going to fire off those 10 rounds in no time. And now you're defenseless. And we all know that, I know we have good policemen here, we have great police departments, they're not going to be there in seconds. It's going to take them time to get there. And by that time, I'm dead, or my family's dead, because I don't have the capacity to fight back properly. And I also kind of wonder when you say, if I'll become a criminal because I buy a gun in West Des Moines, and it has a 15-round magazine that comes with it, and I have to give it up. I have to give it to the police to dispose of, or I have to pay money to have it modified, or I have to get it out of the city limits. That's something that I purchased legally. I went through the process of getting the permit, I went through all that, I've taken training, and yet I'm now going to be told by some people that, no, you can't have that. To me, it's like, I drive home from here tonight and I get a speeding ticket, and because I get a ticket, everybody in Des Moines gets a ticket. Because you're blaming me for what a few other people have done, and that's just not fair to me. I think that instead of pushing these issues here, we should look at more of why do kids want to go into school why does somebody want to go shoot a bunch of people up? Let's look at bullying and mental health before we worry about what you're going to impose on your citizens. Thank you.
My name is Aaron Dorr, I live at 115 Feller Curve in Van Meter. I'm here on behalf of the members of Iowa gun owners. And our members are very much opposed to this proposal or any similar proposal. We kind of know what this is. The state of Iowa has made tremendous progress in advancing gun rights freedom in the last decade with shall issue, stand your ground law, and a lot more. And when certain cities don't like that and they can't get their legislation passed, they go to make these little city ordinances, which would only serve to hem up gun owners. Whether we live in Des Moines or we drive through Des Moines, all it would do is get us in trouble, wouldn't stop any criminals, and that's what our members believe this ordinance was designed to do. We get that you're angry, some of you, about the expansion of gun rights freedom at the state level, but that's a problem at the state level that you guys have to deal with up there. But to violate 724-28 and try to demonize gun owners who've done nothing wrong with this silly ordinance is a disgrace, and we're bitterly opposed to this. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. How you guys doing? I'm Chase Holm, 2119 Southeast 8th Street. I'm a U.S. Army veteran, running for mayor. I've got a decade of experience. I've deployed twice with the Army, and I'm the senior gunner of our actual force, as well as equal opportunity. I know there's a lot of veterans here today with me, and I would never call any of them murderers just for having that weapon to defend their family, defend themselves. That's really out there. And so I will say the biggest qualm that I have with this is that you are going to get sued. I've got an 86-page document from the Supreme Court, as well as the state. You guys are going to get sued, it's going to cost us millions. You know, there's a simple Heller test. It's Heller versus DC, it's an 08 case that was passed. And that Heller test states that if it is, I'll read it verbatim, it's just makes it easier. So the Supreme Court's simple Heller test. In Heller, the U.S. Supreme Court provided a simple Second Amendment test in crystal clear language. It is a test that anyone can understand. The right to keep and bear arms is a right enjoyed by law-abiding citizens to have arms that are not unusual in common use for lawful purposes like self-defense. Millions of ammunition magazines able to hold more than 10 rounds are in common use by law-abiding, responsible citizens for lawful use like self-defense. This is enough to decide that a magazine able to hold more than 10 rounds passes the Heller test, Supreme Court decision, and is protected by the Second Amendment. The simple test applies because a magazine is an essential mechanical part of a firearm. The size limit directly impairs one's ability to defend oneself. There's 86 other pages I've typed up. I am super about policy, and that's one of them. I can send it to any of you guys after this, so you can read over it. We can probably not get sued, hopefully. That's basically it. Let's read some stuff.
Thanks, Chase.
Thank you.
Just so everybody knows in this room, Chase will have an opponent, and he's sitting right here.
Hello, I thank the City Council for letting us come and speak on this. I would say probably the most important matter that I would want to speak about was some comments, Josh, that you had made. I will tell you that I do own firearms that have more than 10 rounds capacity, and I have never in my life thought about injuring anybody, so I'd definitely be careful grouping everybody together, which I'm sure you did that out of emotion. But I mean, thinking about that, I've also got I have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old daughter at home. They're in shooting sports with me. My 9-year-old daughter has fired a weapon that holds more than 10 rounds. So just kind of keep that in mind when we say those comments.
Could you finish your name and address?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, it's Brad Rear, and I live at 4105 Southwest 5th Street in Des Moines. What I would also like to say is I thank Joe for your comments earlier where you said that you would never own a gun, you would never have a permit. I appreciate that because not being a gun owner, you're not pushing your beliefs and what you believe in, same versus me. I don't expect for everybody to run out and get your permit and
I still have a son that's 18 years old that's went through the hunting safety class that has a gun, and I still have a daughter that's 30 years old and her husband that owns a firearm. So, I mean, it's just my belief that it's not, I would never pass it on to my kids or anyone else. It's just their choice.
And
it's your choice.
I definitely agree. And I would say too, I definitely relate with Bill, what you said earlier about if somebody comes through your door, there's going to be two options, and I'm going to be there to protect my family, hands down. But I think the more important thing that I want to touch on, I think that the council needs to really sit down when you're looking at Resolution C and understand what an AR-15 is versus a military-grade weapon or a weapon of war. What a civilian can get in an AR-15 is a lot different than a military grade. So really, truly understand those basics. It's a modern sporting rifle. What I have is not the same as military. So I think that that's the homework you need to do, as well as really review and weigh out defensive shooting incidences versus mass shootings. Because I know you had brought up, I think it was 2,100 roughly. I would like to know how many of those are true, actual, one of these catastrophic events that happen. But again, I agree with you guys looking at Resolution C, but really look at the facts and don't go off of what our mainstream media said about weapons. Really look at the hard, solid facts and look at that. And I think the one that stood out to me the most was 89% of mass shootings happen in gun-free zones. I think that is telling, and I think that's something that everybody should really sit down and think about. Not saying that we should allow guns everywhere, because I'm not saying that's the right answer either for everybody, but I do think that we need to look at other ways to make our families safe than taking weapons away from law-abiding citizens. So with that, thank you.
Thank you for your time. First time up here. Mike Ryan, 3119 Longview Drive, Des Moines, Iowa, part of Beaverdale. I was a little late for the meeting. I apologize for that. So if someone's already gone over this part of the conversation, I'd like to apologize for my reiterating it. I shoot competitively. In doing so, at the different ranges around Polk County, Winterset, wherever, we have classes for high capacity, other capacity magazines. And in order for me to compete in these things, I have to have that ability of the high capacity magazines to compete. I don't know what your sports likes are in your private lives, but let's assume it's bicycling. And all of a sudden I told you I had to have all your front wheels off your bikes. Same difference. I cannot compete in the sport I love. Thank you very much.
Mayor, City Council, Josh, I know that you were really interested in doing something for the people. I understand. Thing is there are people like the killer that slashed Molly Tibbetts to death. If she'd had one of these firearms, she might be here today. And I'm serious that these weapons are made for protection as well as for just hunting or shooting or anything else, for target practice. There are weapons that are used for protection. And as our police officers know, they keep theirs holstered. Citizens that obey the law keep their guns holstered. It's the ones that don't obey the law that we need to go after and we need to bring to justice. It's not the people that are law-abiding citizens. So thanks for your time.
Your name again for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm John Berry with at 3799 Village Run Drive in Des Moines. I've been here for about 10 years.
Good evening, and thank you for listening to us. My name is Michael Priest. I live in rural Lucas County near Sheraton. That's my mailing address. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I don't hear anybody that's voicing my particular slant on this. And I just want to let you know that everybody in this room, I believe, understands that a firearm is without question the most effective means for defending life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think any infringement on firearms ownership, whether it be accessories, magazines, ammunition, licensing, databases, whatever else you want to add to that, is an attack on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I believe it's treasonous.
All right. See no one else at the podium. Thank you all for coming here.
appreciate everyone's comments tonight. And I've got maybe some different thoughts expressed, and I'll share a few of those thoughts, partly to be transparent, so you know where I'm at. As part of this process, I also think that I've seen some areas where maybe there is some common ground, and I'll share some thoughts about that too. I'll start with the things we do know. We do know, on average, 100 Americans are killed every day with a gun, and hundreds more are shot and injured. And this plays out in a lot of different ways. We haven't talked about a number of them tonight, but it plays out in our high rates of gun suicides. And one of the things that is very much linked to that is people who are having suicidal ideation, when they have access to a gun, are much more likely to end up dead than getting the help that they need. It plays out in the fact that a woman in the US is 21 times more likely to die by a gun than a woman in other high-income countries. It plays out in the fact that mass shootings happen all too often in America. We know they happen at schools, in places of worship, where folks work, in movie theaters, and at concerts. Other countries don't have the same problem with gun violence and mass shootings, and it doesn't have to be this way here. We don't need to accept these problems as a normal part of life in America. We can do something about them, and we all have a responsibility to do something about them. And I'll start with some things that we do know about high-capacity magazines. We know that they increase the number of bullets a shooter can fire without reloading. And we know that that increases danger in mass shootings and also danger in daily gun violence that regularly impact our community. An every-time analysis of mass shootings from 2009 to 2017 revealed that of the incidents with known magazine capacity data, 58% involved firearms with high-capacity magazines. These shootings resulted in twice as many fatalities and 14 times as many injuries per incident on average compared to those that did not include the use of high-capacity magazines. We know, and it's been reported, that states with restrictions on magazine size experience mass shootings at less than half the rate of states without restrictions. We have to be willing to tackle all aspects of gun violence and use the tools that are available to us. And it's not just the mass shootings that are made more dangerous by high-capacity magazines. The danger of everyday gun violence is amplified by high-capacity magazines as well. And I'll give you a couple examples from the Third Ward that I represent. One was just recently in the Drake neighborhood. A nursery room was struck by a stray bullet that we know from later investigation was fired from a gun with a high-capacity magazine. With more rounds available, a shooter emptying a magazine in a hurry has more opportunities to carelessly spray bullets into a neighborhood, and there are consequences to that. Another example was last summer. And Joe, this is something that you actually helped bring to my attention. There was a motorcycle gang on Southwest 9th that had actually ended up occupying a space illegally. And we ended up doing a decent amount of work to get those folks out of that space. And our police officers did a phenomenal job. And it was a major issue for the folks living in proximity there. And the end result of that, ultimately, our officers had to arrest 3 individuals. And one of them, who was threatening and menacing the neighborhood, had a handgun with a 30-round magazine. In that case, a high-capacity magazine made a dangerous situation more dangerous, and it magnified both the threat to our officers and our community. So these are real problems that affect our community, and that we have a responsibility to grapple with how we solve them. You know, there's another piece that I want to address, and I think, Brad, you mentioned it. You also mentioned it. You know, when you're up here on this podium, you don't always choose your words as carefully as you would like. And I recognize I have not always chosen my words as carefully as I would like. And folks keyed in on one of those things from the last meeting. And I did not want to imply that every gun owner who currently owns a high-capacity magazine had murderous intent. That is not what I meant. That was not the intention that I had. And to folks that I offended from that, I do owe you an apology. That is not the way to have a dialogue and to effectively address these issues. I will try and clarify what I mean, and you might not like that much better, but I will try and say that. You know, I recognize that there are responsible gun owners who own high-capacity magazines today. What I was trying to say is I don't think there is a necessity. And particularly, I know there are reasons to use it. I know, I don't know where the gentleman who talked about using high-capacity magazines at the range and as part of competitions. I know that exists. I know there are folks who think that it is necessary for self-defense. I recognize that. But I think when weighed against the danger and the potential harm, that I don't think high-capacity magazines are necessary for folks to have. You can still have your firearm and still respect the Second Amendment with restrictions on high-capacity magazines. And there have been plenty of courts who agreed with that. Every federal appellate court that has looked at this issue, post-Heller, I might add, and has looked at restrictions on magazine bans, has upheld them. But regardless of how one feels about banning large capacity magazines or trigger activators, I hope that part of this exercise will lead to us being able to find some common ground. And one of the things that folks have talked about on both sides is looking at what steps can we take to reduce gun violence. It's maybe come across in different ways, but folks who've been critical of this discussion of high-capacity magazine bans have urged us to focus on criminals, and they don't think that the high-capacity magazine ban will address the criminal behavior. Other folks, even if they support a high-capacity magazine ban, are looking for steps that we can take as a community to address gun violence. And I think that maybe represents a little piece of where there could be some common ground in this discussion. We can do something locally about gun violence without having to weigh into the legal questions about preemption or interpretations of the Second Amendment. There are things that we can do locally, and we should be looking at those as part of this discussion too. And there are multiple models of community-based violence intervention programs that apply a localized approach to gun violence prevention and have been proven to be effective. These evidence-based community programs identify individuals who are at the highest risk of shooting or being shot, and work to reduce violence through targeted interventions. Examples include Cure Violence, which takes a public health approach and uses street outreach workers to mediate and prevent conflict. Group Violence Intervention, which uses a group meeting to allow law enforcement, social service organizations, and community members to reach those likely to engage in violence. And Hospital-Based Violence Intervention, which engages gunshot victims in the hospital in order to help break the cycle of violence. As we're working through the policy issues, and Resolution C provides an avenue to continue discussion and look into ways to build consensus, I'd like to see us take concrete steps towards implementing on-the-ground violence intervention. And I hope I can give a friendly amendment to Councilmember Coleman's motion to do just that. And what I would like is for the city manager and police chief to research a number of things and come back to us. One is an assessment of gun violence in Des Moines. So help us come to a better understanding of what is going on from a gun violence perspective. Two, give us an assessment of evidence-based best practices nationally. In particular, some of the examples that I highlighted would be good places to start. But if there are other best practice programs, that should be part of our conversation too. The third piece is do an assessment of existing programs in Des Moines. And those can be in city government or with nonprofit, county, state partners. Let us know what's going on and how that fits with the best practices. And then the fourth piece is come back with a recommendation for steps that we can take to either enhance and or implement new programs. And what are the administrative, data support, and local infrastructure that we would need to effectively do that. And the goal being, and I would hope that we could do a work session exploring some of these results and some of these options to implement additional gun violence prevention at the local level in our next city budget. So that would be my friendly amendment. And if that is done, I'd be in a position where I think I could support Resolution C. I'm glad that we've started this conversation. I appreciate hearing the various viewpoints. I recognize folks don't always agree, but I think there are things that we can do at the local level, and things that we can do to build a coalition. And we can continue to think about all of the actions that we need to take, because it's going to require a comprehensive approach. We have over 36,000 gun deaths in this country and over 100,000 gun injuries in this country every year. And we should be taking action. We are responsible for that, because those are threats to our public safety that are experienced by our constituents every day. And I'm encouraged, even if solutions that I proposed and think that we need are not moving forward as I would have liked this evening. I'm encouraged that we're having this conversation. I'm encouraged that we're talking about how we engage others in having this conversation. I'm encouraged that we're going to look to continue conversations with state and federal folks on what we can do. And I remain committed to working towards a comprehensive approach to gun safety in our community. And I am glad that we're at least taking some steps towards that end.
Question. Josh talked about doing some assessments and having the police department or whoever's going to do these assessments. First off, right now, and the chief can answer this, I don't think we're at authorized strength right now for the Des Moines Police Department because we have not hired enough police officers. So if we're talking about taking time for the Des Moines Police Department to do these assessments and the things that Josh is asking to do, and money from the Des Moines Police Department's budget, I am an absolute no vote for C or any other version that we're going to do. They're already shorthanded. They're already trying to do work that they don't have enough people for because we can't hire enough. And this is what we've been doing with staff. We've been sending them off on wild goose chases when we should be talking about basic services. And basic services are those police officers and their commanders out on the street keeping us safe. That's what we should be focusing on. That's what we should be doing. So I guess I'm going to ask you, the city manager, where's the funding coming from and who's going to do that if that's part of number C?
And if I could, I'd like to suggest that we have a conversation first about the gun violence in Des Moines with the chief before the additional research is done. So that way we can understand what the current situation really is in a data-driven sense. And that way we can understand how much time it might take to do that additional research. Take the first step in understanding what the current situation is here in Des Moines. And then direct staff on an appropriate amount of research if even necessary. If that's what you're asking.
That's still taking time away from our Des Moines Police Department.
All right, I got it. Let's vote.
You got it.
In fairness to Josh and comments that I made before, I did reference in addition to the motion as it's written in our packet that in the interim we do have the opportunity to move forward and execute some ideas that maybe haven't been a priority before. The way I worded it was to refer it to the manager and, maybe it's the Human Rights Department, maybe it's the police chief, other people to get involved. I think it's worth that assessment. I hesitate to adopt the motion as you worded it only because I get nervous about, dates and specific activities that we haven't really, talked through. I think the manager can return. I'm interested to see if there's best practices that maybe the ambassadors want to work with us on. That has been, what I think a remarkable and award-winning strategy that's worked. The police chief has managed that. The hospital outreach, some of the actual activities that Josh talked about, I think are really worthy of talking about with the people that were here, and understanding more about it, I think would be healthy for all of us. So I would, I'd kind of stick with my motion to refer it to the manager to get us that. I think the data that Josh is talking about is probably pretty readily available, and maybe some of that is wise to share with
I would
us.
hope it would be readily available.
Yeah.
That strikes me as the type of thing that you want to know if you're focused on local public safety.
Yeah. So I guess in my words, I said it before, we took testimony, and I'd repeat them, that those strategies for addressing the violence that we see in our community through innovative and best practices from around the country are things that we should ask the city manager to take responsibility for and to put the right team together. Again, as Joe points out, we aren't authorizing you to spend money or do things. If there is, I think we should have a specific conversation about that for an upcoming budget. Josh and I talked about that. So I think we hold off and don't plan on executing, but making a report to the council manager. With that, if I could make just one other editorial comment. We've been lucky to get testimony off and on for a couple of months on this subject and other subjects. It never ceases to amaze me the high caliber citizens we have in this town and the way we can approach really tough issues. And for that, I'm thankful and impressed and appreciate you being here and helping us weigh these important issues. It was your demeanor and approach was really refreshing, and I appreciate it.
We have a motion, sounds like.
Can we go over the motion one more time for me, so I'm comfortable?
I'm moving C. There's a statement in the packet that highlights that. I think it's 6 sentences long or something. It's not real long. In addition to that, to refer to the city manager the issue of studying best practices and ideas from around the country that would be able to be executed locally, and for him to return to the council in a written report or report as he puts it together for us to consider. Most of them are probably things that they can execute without our approval. Ideas for the ambassadors, I keep looking out at the chief, other things. Josh has mentioned one that I think is a kind of a handle for me of these. It's outreach to victims of violence in order to try and help break that cycle of violence. Those are the kinds of things that I think we can do without any controversy at all. And my guess is we probably have volunteers in this room that would help us execute some of those strategies. So study those and bring them back. And that's what I referred earlier. This came out originally in the conversation I had with the mayor on Sunday afternoon about doing these things better, and I'm just the one vocalizing the things he's talked about for a long time.
I would hope that we're already doing some of that.
Well, and to that, I think we want to get the available data that's out there that Josh has pointed out to look at the violence and where we are and assess what it is, and then that might help us address how we pick up the speed on the hiring in the police department. So I think that data will help you and all of us make more decisions about public safety. So I think we have a motion. I hope everybody understands it.
7 yes.
I want to thank everybody for being here this evening. This was an important discussion. And to all of you who I think we all have an interest on protecting the rights of all of our citizens, but also public safety is certainly utmost and top on our agenda. And I will thank everybody, including Chase, for being here and for your service to the country. No, listen, this is to your service to the country and the military, and I appreciate that very much. I've been there. I was assigned to a single battalion in different conflict,